What is going on, everyone, and welcome back to the Sports Talk on Tap podcast. We're here. You can find daily videos covering the NFL and NBA, but also we'll be talking, a little bit about the NHL and MLB season, especially for MLB as the playoffs get closer, and NHL season when they arrive. But with that being said, right now it's majority football because we are officially 1 week away from kickoff next Thursday. The Cowboys and Eagles take the field. Who's not excited? I mean, tonight we got college football ramping up. Boise State, my Golden Gophers, see if they can do anything this year. Take the field tonight, and then a big college weekend, obviously, Texas, Ohio State. So, who's not going to be lit for those games? Number one, number three team. But with that being said, we're going to continue. For anyone who hasn't already, make sure to go check out my NFL standings predictions divisions. But with that being said, I also did tweak a couple things. I thought about it a little bit more. I was like, I can't disrespect the Rams like that. And I did end up flipping them and the Seahawks kind of in my sleep. Was like, I still have some doubts about the Seahawks offensive line. But I still think it's going to be close up. I think both teams are going to win around 10 games. But I'm just going to ride with the Rams. I'm going to trust that Matthew Stafford's healthy and that he'll be ready to go. But I still like the Cardinals to win this division. I think they're the most complete team and a sneaky team to do that. But with that being said, this is the bracket of how I think things will shake out. And then, I'm just going to go game by game, predict how each one of them goes and who is my Super Bowl champion. Could be a boom, could be a bust. Who I think is going to make the Super Bowl, who can go on a sneaky run, all that fun stuff. But with that being said, we'll just get right into it. Who do I have win the Super Bowl? But with that being said, first up, we start in the wild card round where the Raiders are my sleeper team. I love the Raiders. I think they're going to be sneaky good. That was another thing I also did is I put them last in my division predictions, but I was like, that doesn't feel right. I'm going to have them jumping the Chargers, just the Chargers. I like them, but with injuries, especially to Rashawn Slater. In the defense, I have some regression concerns about. I like the Raiders, and you know what? I'm just going to stick with my gut, and, I kind of went with my brain, but I'm going with my heart in these playoff predictions. So with that being said, we have Ravens, Raiders. I got to go with Baltimore, though. This isn't one where I'm really thinking too much. The Ravens, I love what they're doing. They only got stronger, one of the best secondaries in football. That defense really came on second half of last year. And then as long as Lamar's healthy, Bateman took another step. You have Likely, Andrews, Zay Flowers entering year 3 can only get better. That running game, year 2 with Derrick Henry, no signs of regression for him. So I love that one. And, I'm excited to see what they do. And then next one, we have a little AFC West battle here in the 3-6 matchup between the Denver Broncos and the Kansas City Chiefs. And I think this would actually be a great game, just because they've known each other, they play each other tough. This would be, a very exciting one. Bo Nix in year 2. And, the Broncos, number 1 defense last year, or top defense, top 3, I think number 1 going to be this year. But with that being said, Mahomes, Rashee Rice come back. He will be suspended, but should be back for the playoffs, obviously, by this time. This Kansas City team still going to be very good. Still going to be a 12-plus win team. But with that being said, I think Denver just poses some tough matchup problems. And I think, call me crazy, I have Denver in the upset. I think just Kansas City, they've gone to the Super Bowl multiple times. I think this is just kind of a reset year. They take some steps back. And I still love, what they have on defense with Chris Jones, George Karlaftis, but there's just got to be at some point where a team upsets them, and I think the Denver Broncos would be the team to do that. And then the final game, Texans always seem to be that 4 seed. They'd be hosting the Cincinnati Bengals. This would be a great matchup, Texans defense, Bengals offense, and then obviously CJ Stroud against that Bengals defense would probably feast despite the offensive line problems. But the Bengals did get Trey Hendrickson back. This one for me is another toss-up. The 4-5s are always kind of close. But with that being said, I just like what what the Bengals can bring to the table in this, but I also do like the Texans. But I'm going to trust with the QB play in this one. I'm going to take Joe Burrow, and, I'm a little mini upset here just because the Texans, despite how bad their offensive line is, anyone can really feast against this Bengals defense. But I think Trey Hendrickson can make just 1 or 2 plays to disrupt them. I got the Bengals winning this one. With that being said, we'll move over to the NFC, where I have the Eagles again as the number 2 seed hosting the Rams. I think it could be a little bit closer, but I mean, last year's game in the divisional round was very close, came down the wire. I think this would be, a tough game for the Eagles, but you got right with the Eagles. I think better offensive line, better team overall. But defenses are pretty close with the way the Rams ended, but the Eagles at home, Saquon Barkley, we saw what he can do against this Rams team in the regular season and postseason. You got right the Eagles. And then the next one, the Cardinals versus the Commanders. This would be another great game. Jane Daniels, Scary Terry, that defense running momentum from last season into this season. But the Cardinals are my sleeper team. Marvin Harrison Jr., Kyler Murray, they were top 10 defense to end the season last year. They added Montez Sweat, a couple guys to make that team better. Call me crazy. I think not necessarily a sophomore slump, but the Commanders for me, they still got some question marks on the defensive side more so. I think the Cardinals are just the more balanced team. I think Kyler Murray can just take it to a different level this season. I got the Cardinals moving on. And then Buccaneers, once again, the NFC South champions, the 4 seed always, it's them with the Texans locked in, take on the Vikings. I got to go with the Vikings here in my prediction. I just think the Vikings are, the better team overall, better. Tampa Bay could provide some promise, but the Vikings, the upgrades they made, getting Jonathan Allen, Javon Hargrave, all along with Jonathan Grenard, Van Ginkel already makes them stacked, and then adding Will Fries, drafting Donovan Jackson, Ryan Kelly to boost the offensive line that gave problems in the trenches. I think Tampa Bay Baker's a dog. This game would be close. I think it'd come down to similar to last year's wild card, a field goal game, but I just trust the Vikings roster more so as a whole. So that's why I'm right with the Vikings. But shout out Tampa Bay, always a solid team. With that being said, we'll move over to the divisional round where I have the Buffalo Bills, obviously Josh Allen, Keon Coleman entering year 2, James Cook, hoping he plays. I think this team is always going to be well-rounded and stacked. And we saw what they did to Denver last year. I'd expect a much closer game this year, but you still got right with Buffalo here. 1 seed at home, Bills Mafia would be lit. That defense, is always consistent, and against some of the lesser offenses in the playoffs, I think they could do a good job holding them. And then another AFC North matchup here. Give me the Ravens. I think just more balanced. I think that's what's shown. Burrow and Lamar can go tit for tat, but the Ravens defense is just way better overall, and I think that'd be the difference in this one. Jamar Chase, Joe Burrow, they'd still try to carry, but I trust Baltimore, especially given home field at this point. But with that being said, Lions, Vikings, we've seen this a lot. I still got to go with the Lions. I'm not going to be too biased here. I think the Lions still, with Gibbs, Montgomery, the offensive line is still good despite losing some pieces. We'll see how they're filled. Jared Goff, I think when this defensive line is healthy, they're up there with the Vikings overall. And I just think they're a good team. Deion Branch really broke out in year 1 last year. I like the Lions still, and I know losing the coordinators may hurt, but when you have those dynamic running backs, Amon-Ra, Jameson Williams, they'll find a way to get the ball. I find it very hard for them not to repeat success. They might not win 15 games. They might win like 13, might 12, might take a little bit of a step back. But with that being said, and I also did just ran through the predictions. That's why if you see in the back, like Falcons 4-13, I don't think that's going to happen. I think they can win like 7 games. But I just had to rush through the playoff predicted. I did automatically just with the teams and seeding I wanted it to. So ignore those records because I think the 49ers will be better than that. Packers are obviously going to win 10 games, but just due to tiebreakers, that's the only reason why it's like that. I just simmed through, just told them the 7 teams I wanted, and that's it. But with that being said, the other matchup, Eagles Cardinals. I think this is where the Cardinals run ends. I just think overall, got to go with the team with the better offensive line, better quarterback play in the playoffs, better defense overall, despite what the Cardinals did. I think the Eagles' depth is still insane. But with that being said, I do have the Eagles going back to the Super Bowl over the Lions. I think they're just as good as the Lions are. They're not the Eagles good. And that's simple. When healthy, I think the Eagles are just the better team. Depth-wise, they've proven they can let guys like Milton Williams walk, and they'll still be fine with the Lions' depth. I have a little bit more question marks. And just in the playoffs, I've seen what Jalen Hurts can do. Jared Goff in last year's playoffs, despite how bad the defense was, he had 3 turnovers on his own. So, that's, something. And then Bills Ravens rematch of last year's iconic divisional. This time, I have the Ravens coming out top. I think this is Lamar's year to just go all the way and shut the haters up. I think this team's the most complete team with the Eagles. And an insane Super Bowl, Eagles Ravens. My Super Bowl champions will be the Baltimore Ravens. I just think this is the year for Lamar. I'm excited to see what he can do. But like I said, the way they ended last year with the defense on a high note, and I think, the taste in their mouth from that game in Buffalo where they really outplayed the Bills most of the game, but turnovers is what hurt them. The Mark Andrews drop. I think it's going to be a revenge year for the Ravens, and I'm excited to see it. I think this will be a great game. Eagles will obviously put up a fight. But, I just think, maybe a little bit of a Super Bowl hangover in this one. I think the Ravens, are just going to be vengeful. I think Lamar can match Jalen Hurts just with his playmaking ability. And he's proven to be a better quarterback in the playoffs as recently. Just the turnovers have been a little bit of a problem, and the Ravens shooting themselves in the foot. But I think there's one year where they got to break it, and I think this will be the year. But with that being said, let me know what you guys agree, disagree with in the comments for my playoff predictions. Did I miss an upset? Is it the Chiefs going back? I'm excited to get your guys' thoughts in the comment section below. But as always, make sure to like and subscribe because football season is just a week away. Like I said, can't wait. College football really ramping up tonight and this weekend. So let me know your guys' favorite teams, who you guys have win the CFP. We'll do some college ball later on too, for sure. And yeah, but with that being said, as always, make sure to like, subscribe if you enjoy this kind of content. I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.